Hi everyone, I'm Louise Bazalgette, Deputy Director of Nesta's A Fairer Start mission, and I'll be chairing this event this evening. Thank you so much everyone for joining us. For anyone who isn't familiar with Nesta, we're an innovation agency that supports innovation for social good. And our A Fairer Start mission aims to close the school readiness gap between disadvantaged children and their peers. And alongside aims at Nesta, inclusive is one of our core aims. It's really important for us to figure out how inclusiveness. So I'm really delighted to welcome Joss Cambridge-Simmons to this Nesta Talks To event to tell us more about the role of early education and childcare in tackling gender stereotypes. So thank you so much for joining us, Joss. And by way of introduction, Joss is the founder of the childcare service Jossy Care, and he's been really vocal in challenging male stereotypes and sexism in the childcare industry. And in recognition of his work, in 2019, he won the Positive Role Model Award for Gender in the National Diversity Awards. So I'm going to start by asking Joss a few introductory questions just to get us started. And while we're talking, please, if you're in the audience, please do start putting any questions for Joss in the chat, and we'll be able to cover them a bit later as we go along. And so to start, Joss, thanks again for joining us. Please.
Hi, good evening.
Hi. Please, could you tell us how you first got started working in childcare?
I started off working in a nursery called Asquith Day Nurseries, which is now run by Bright Horizons, I think. It went to Kids Unlimited, then went to Bright Horizons. So that's how long I've been in this, because Kids Unlimited is no longer. So I started when I was 19. I'm 34 next month. So you can work out how long it's been. So I've been working with children from birth. So youngest I've ever worked with when I was 19 was 4 months. So I'm no stranger to children that are, how can I put it, that aren't aware of who they are yet or what they are. And how I've kind of come into nannying was, I was always working early as a nursery teacher. I was babysitting, and I was babysitting even more during the day. And babysitting from 9 to 5 becomes nannying, because babysitting to me is 6 p.m. to bedtime. So I've been nannying and working in childcare since the age of 19, and it stemmed from a family asking me to babysit, and me seeing a film called Daddy Daycare.
Oh, right.
And that kind of inspired me to keep going with it, because I was doing it already. And then Jossy Care came about from just having a business card, and the children in the nursery calling me Jossy. And then I had a business card that I made with Vistaprint. And then what I was doing from them was every nursery I worked in, every family in the nursery I ended up babysitting for. Mm-hmm. And then every nursery I moved to, I got more families, then more families, then more families. So I started getting families all around North London, then out of London, and now worldwide, where I now work abroad. I'm off to Mykonos at the end of May. I've worked in Antigua, I've worked in Saudi Arabia, I've worked in Switzerland, I've worked in France. And it's all stemmed from me just having an idea, because I said to myself, I wanted to be a nanny, but I didn't want to work for just one family. And I wanted to have my own way of working with children, which was always child-led. So I was doing child-led before I knew what it was, because I got taught in the moment learning, and letting children lead from when I was 19, 20, when it was foreign in nurseries. And the nursery teams we was working with weren't against it, but they struggled with it. So this is why I find it so easy to walk into a setting or a household, not set up an activity, but let said child navigate play. And it also backs up how I help children navigate their emotions and their well-being, where I let them guide me into find out what it is I might think they need. Because when you become in tune with children show you what they need rather than you giving them what you think they need. But you've got to become in tune and be present. And that's only become fine-tuned over time, where it's been 15 plus years that I've now been able to still do it. And I still get it wrong. But I was working yesterday, and baby boy, I wasn't sure what was wrong with him. He kept crying with the soft play. As soon as we got to soft play, I took him out of the buggy and put him on the floor. He cried, and I realized that I took him out too fast.
Mm. It was a surprise for him.
Like
And
section, so yeah.
You talking about how you got started just made me wonder,
Yeah.
because you've obviously been doing it for a while now. Is there anything that you kind of wish you'd known when you were starting out that you know now? Like if you were to talk to your younger self, is there anything particular?
No, because I wouldn't be where I am now or who I am. Even when you could be in circumstances that aren't the best for you, everything happens for a reason. And it's like Back to the Future and those, and like the Matrix, when you go back in time. Like I'm a big Marvel fan. When the Avengers go back in time, press one wrong button, move one wrong teacup, you can change the peripheral of what comes next. I wouldn't change anything because we wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be on webinars talking about the work that we're trying to do in early years if I was to go back in time and say, I wish I knew more. I'm happy with what I know and what I've gathered. And even the mistakes I've made, I have to own it and say I made a mistake, but I wouldn't change it because life is life.
You learn from that, don't you?
Yeah.
And then I think you'd already started talking about this a little bit, but what do you find most inspiring about working with children?
What I find most inspiring about working with children is learning life through them, because children are the best teachers. Most child carers will tell you they love seeing children happy, when it's not about being happy. It's about helping children to become present and helping children to understand what happiness looks like to them. So nurturing their emotions and helping them become grounded and creating safe spaces for them. So what really inspires me the most is that a children really chooses you. You don't choose said child. It's like a husband and wife. I'm a big believer your wife chooses you, that you don't choose your wife. And that's only when love is present. Because love chooses you, that you don't choose it. You might give it, but it's chosen whether to give it back to you or not. So love being the said child that's the instigator of whether they want me in their life or not as a child carer. And I've probably had 9 out of 10 times where a child's chosen me, 1 out of 10 times when a child's not chosen me, and that's because I don't force it. I don't force a bond with a child, and I was right that the child didn't choose me because mum was pregnant. Mum wasn't letting the child know they was having a baby. The baby's come from Australia with parents. They've not met a male before. They've not met a black male before. There was a new household. My accent wasn't the same. My linguistics weren't the same, and parents were expecting me to bond with a child over a short period of time. They wanted me to bond with her within like a week. Where she was a bit anxious already, she might have needed a longer time than a week. And only because I read the room where I turned around and said to them that I can't move forward with childcare with you guys, but I can find you new childcare. And that's me honouring the child's emotions and letting the child lead, and not putting myself first because I'm an adult and I think I know it all.
So do you tend to have some kind of settling period to start with to see if it's working out?
Yes. I had the same kind of settling period as nurseries, but because of the way I work, I can have as much as possible, especially when families are coming to me when the mums or the dads are on maternity leave or paternity leave, and there's no rush for them to get back to something. We can, like, I'm with a family now, and we're playing it by ear, where I've said to the mum honestly in a 2-minute voice note that I'm letting the child lead us, so we'll have 3 hours next week. And because nurseries tend to do settling sessions, take the parent away drastically, leave child in said environment with new adults, and there's no focus on the child's well-being or if this child's comfortable, if this environment safe enough for said child. I now have settling sessions with parents, because what I've learned is when you've got a strong bond with parents, children then have a stronger bond with you. And I want to build a safe space with the safe spaces you've got around you, because children don't know how to interpret me taking them away and bringing them back. So if they see it smoothly done, mum and dad can leave and say bye.
That's a really nice idea. Yeah. So you spend some time with the parents and get to know them first before you meet the children.
Yeah. No, with the children, and that way, even if, because most child carers and nursery teachers and nannies will tell parents, don't say bye, just sneak out. That's heartbreaking. So your child's going to turn around and you're not going to be there. I'm not Superman or Superwoman. So what are we expecting this child to do and how to navigate these set emotions when, in the child's eyes, you've just left them? So it's best that you say bye and we work on them understanding that you're coming back. But that can only be done if they're secure in the attachments with you and they're secure in the attachments with me, where sometimes that doesn't go well. And that's a sign that the attachments in the space aren't the healthiest, because if the child's constantly crying every time a said parent leaves, there's more work to be done to build a stronger, secure attachment that's more healthy, and the child isn't always in need. And sometimes what I'm coming to learn now is some children just ain't ready. Some children just ain't ready to leave their parents' abode yet at the age of 1 or 2, and we have to really honor that. We don't, because we're adults and we like to put ourselves first and we've got stuff to do. But if we really take our time and put our time into it, realize that our child isn't ready yet. Let's wait. Let's have a babysitter come over and babysit when we're here,
and like lead up to it
to build a rapport over time. So yeah.
And have you noticed since COVID, with children you've been looking after, has that process been harder at all? Because a lot of children had spent more time with their families and they hadn't been exposed to as many people in their own family, or like...
No, it hasn't been. The hardest thing is being out and about, because some children haven't been able to learn how to be sociable with anyone else apart from their household. But then it's not even, I can't even say it's hard, because we expect so much from children.
Yeah.
When it's not really been difficult. It's more been, I have to become more in tune with said child and really find out how they're going to support them in navigating this, see it as normal, and see it as this child is new to all of these scenarios, whether it's soft play, a new adult in the household, or a new playground, or less playgrounds or more walks in the buggy, and navigating that with them to make sure there's every transition smooth and every space we go to is safe, whether it be a house, park, or soft play. So yes.
Yeah, I think you make such a good point there, because I remember like when my daughter, she's like nearly 6 now, but when she was a baby, I would just sort of take her to these like really crazy busy environments in children's centres, and she'd just be like, what's going on, you know?
Yeah.
And it did take a long time for her to get used to that.
Yeah.
You know, I think we do sort of just thrust children into various situations, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, what I wanted to ask you next was, what do you think children learn from seeing men working in caring roles?
What children tend to learn is representation matters, where they're not interpreting how we're interpreting it, but they're none the wiser to the fact that they're wiser to the fact that there's a man and there's a male, and then there's also non-binaries and transgenders as well, because you have to add them to the conversation, because we often forget them in conversations around representation in nurseries or schools. So what it does for children, it normalizes it. It normalizes seeing every gender in roles where they're caring for them. It's not just the adult at home. I'm not going to say just the mum, because some households it's just dad. So it normalizes them seeing adults caring for them other than the adults they have at home. And then also, especially with families that might live in areas where they're predominantly white or predominantly Asian or predominantly Jewish, they've got a harder job, because you're sending your children to sometimes private schools or local state schools that have a influx of certain cultures, and Afro-Caribbean children could be the minority in there. We need to make sure now our children aren't seeing Afro-Caribbean children as minorities and exposing them to all cultures. Where I've realised I do a lot of school runs at private schools, and I'm looking and I'm not seeing one black kid. I'm not seeing one Indian child. I'm only seeing white children. And I'm like, these children might grow up not realising they haven't got any black friend or Asian friend or Jewish friend. And then they also look at the fact that these children and families might only think that white people have money. So they might only think that only my friends that look at me come from backgrounds where they have a driver and a cleaner, when there's families from all cultures that have that. But because you put yourself in bubbles when you put your children in private schools, the other side of it is you need to now make sure that you've got culture around your children, and you're exposing them to cultures, and you're also exposing yourself, because sometimes money can take you to places where you're not going to see someone like me. We're not going to see someone like you, because it might be an affluent Jewish area like Golders Green, but most of the there might not be any black children in the Jewish nursery in Golders Green.
And when you were working in like nursery environments kind of towards the beginning of your career, were they generally quite diverse environments, and were there other men working there?
Yes,
or did it,
there was other men, but the men tend to come and go. They don't ever stay. I tend to be the only man that stays. Well, most nurseries I worked in, I've been the longest standing man that's been in there. Where I'm, apart from my Cody, Jamal Carley, Rob Fox, there's not many men that I know, and David Khan and a few others. There's like a handful of men that I've been doing childcare for like a continuous amount of years. There's not.
And do you know like what jobs they went on to do if they like left? Were they?
No, because nurseries tend to put men in preschool or reception.
Right.
So a lot of men become primary school teachers or youth workers or work in care homes, because we're pushed as men to work with older kids because everyone assumes you want to play football and do sports, when hypothetically speaking, we can be as nurturing, as caring as opposite genders and genders in between. So it's a lot of society push us men to do roles with older children and don't look at us doing the roles that I do. Where most nurseries, you might see nurseries now that have men in their baby rooms, but it's probably not a lot.
Mm. And why do you think the men weren't staying in those sorts of roles?
I think it's how society perceive you as a man that works in these roles. How your own culture might, just how the culture in general, because people look at us funny when I say I do this job. People think I'm joking when I say that I work with kids.
Really?
People. I have women ask me if I'm gay, like, openly in dialogue ask me if I'm gay because they've seen that I work with children. I've had parents ask me if I'm gay on job interviews over the years. When it's people's perception of a man that might work with a child is a certain perception, regardless of what the adult looks like. It's like my interview with the children on CBBC when they had to guess my job from what I look like, just based on what I had on, and there was no stereotypes, but there were stereotypes based on my gender, not based on what I look like. And then the children themselves couldn't answer to why they had stereotypes about the fact that I don't look like a nanny, because I asked them what does a nanny look like, and they all said a woman. They just assume that someone that's a nanny is a woman, that's a nursery teacher, that's a woman, etc. So yeah.
And why do you think there's a need? Because I know like you're doing a lot of advocacy. Why do you think there's a need to highlight the value of men working in childcare?
Because we need to. It's the same fight that women have to have a stronger voice in workplaces in every industry, and to make it equal. It needs to be equal on both fields, because men haven't got as much rights when it comes to paternity leave. And that's because of how society perceives men as fathers and perceives men in caregiving roles. Our perception's quite minimal, where as a woman, you're seen to have a baby, go back to work after 9 months, it's all hunky-dory. As a father, you're giving 4 weeks off, 2 weeks off. What's the difference between me and mum? If mum breastfeeds, she can express and I can have a baby. What happens if we're two fathers? There's no maternity leave there for two dads. If it's a double dad household. So the importance is to kind of make it to normalize it and make it easier for us men to be confident and say we want to work with children, and not have people look at us like, oh, he works with kids. Because that happens a lot. Like I get those comments a lot in conversation with people.
Yeah, that must be horrible. And what impact do you think it has for children when they see a man working in childcare? How do you think that sort of changes their view?
It's just a second somebody to relate to. So it gives them more balance, especially if they've got transgenders in their life. Adult that's a transgender or adult that's a non-binary. It gives them a peripheral of what the world looks like, because the world doesn't no longer look male or female. It looks all of the in-betweens and everything outside of it. So we need to make sure that these children are seeing every single version of this in every capacity, on TV, in magazines, in storybooks, in classrooms, in schools, on maternity wards, in GPs, that children are seeing adults that don't look like them, that look like them, that don't sound like them, that look like me, that look like you. So Because if you look at it, a lot of our culture, we still only date in our cultures. We still only socialize in our cultures. Like, I'm from Islam, white people date white people, black people date black people. And there's no one can ever tell you why. It's just something that we just do. Then the people that go in between are frowned upon. So what are we then teaching our children that are going to come up that are hopefully going to eradicate that? Because that's still a thing for in 2022, where our children hopefully aren't going to have any issues with having friends from other cultures and having a best friend that's XYZ culture or different gender or non-disclosed gender, etc. It becomes normalized and more simplistic for them if we normalize it and become used to it and take away the ignorance that we have.
And have you seen any changes in the childcare industry in terms of people's kind of awareness of these issues and their like openness to talking about, you know, issues around racism and gender and stereotyping?
Yes and no, where there's no longer an elephant in the room, but people are still stepping in the elephant's mess and not always holding themselves accountable for said issues, where race issues in early years are still vast, where me, Jamal Carley, Liz Hurley, Laura Henry, and other counterparts from the culture have to make up X amount of noise just to be seen. Whether it's on a level as a child carer, a consultant, advocate, a teacher, where we're now a force to be reckoned with, but we've had to work harder than our non-cultured, our counterparts just to get here, where people are now seeing us for the work we do and now seeing the value of it when we've been working for as long as others have been working. It's just the gatekeepers happen to be white. So we have to knock on the door.
That's what needs to change, isn't it?
Yeah. So we're no longer knocking on the door, we're just creating our own doors. That's why we've got stuff like early years blacklist, and we turn down invitations to certain panels to sit on, because if there's no one on the panel that looks like me, I don't want him. Even with these early years award shows, a lot of the panels aren't diverse in gender or culture. So how could anyone on the panel judge me if no one on the panel looks like me or no one on the panel has the same gender as me? Judge me on the work I've did. When I've seen certain award shows happen and no men I've been the only man that's been called up, but I haven't won anything. And I think a lot of it is where they're not ready to give a man said award for whatever it is. So I think there is still a lot of work to be done. Yeah,
absolutely. And just thinking about like your kind of previous work in earlier settings and like your work now as well, are there any particular kind of behaviours that you think need to be challenged in terms of how people work with children and how that might kind of perpetuate gender stereotypes or other types of stereotypes?
I think go to therapy as adults, because you're a parent, so you would know how much you might project on your children. It's never intentional. It's never intentional. But you realise how much work you need to do on yourself to help them navigate life, whether they're 2, 5, or 15. So I would tell a lot of adults in early years and adults in general to do the work, so you don't become an adult that's what's the word I'm looking for? That's damaging the space a child's in. And I think that's the biggest piece of work that we can do, is becoming more self-aware, having a practice that is secure, is helping children to become secure and solidifying a space to make it safe, and not putting ourselves into said space and seeing it's for the child only. What does this child need or doesn't need? And let me tune in. And what work do I need to do in myself to not let my cultural biases or my own gender navigate me helping this child? And how can I just help this child from a place of just being present and it not being based on my gender or where I'm from? Because our cultural differences have a big impact on how we support children. Because culturally we was all raised differently, but then we wasn't raised how we're raising our children now. We was all kind of told to kind of jump up and then told how high. So and that's not a black or white thing. We can all kind of relate to that, where you might have all got a slap once or twice as a child, where we're now having to navigate adulthood with our own children to see that stuff isn't right, but it's still embedded in us. So when we're professionals, it's even harder to have certain embedding. So I'm very big on therapy and having a team where you can be very reflective and not bring your own personal judgments and cultural egos into it, unless it's a part of your culture that's beneficial to the space and to the child. But even then, does the child want that?
And how have you created reflective spaces for yourself? Because I completely agree with you. It's like really important to have that.
Yes.
But you kind of need like other exposure to other kind of narratives, don't you, and other ways of thinking. And like, how have you done that for yourself?
Having a nice team to go to. So my EYBR team, Jamal, Laura, Liz, and outside the team, Jane Evans, who's I would say she's a parenting coach and she's just amazing. But those are the 5 people that I would go to personally, or just think of. I'd think of what would Jamal do, what would Laura do, what would Jane do, and more so what would Jane do, because Jane's approach to children and parenting and adulthood is against the grain. I embody everything she stands for, and that's how I kind of work. So anything I'm not sure with, I kind of put my Jane hat on and think or contact Jane. And a lot of it is just reflective, where the more and more in tune I become with life, the more and more I'm able to let go of narratives that I think I have for children and let them navigate, where a child-led approach is foreign to a lot of people. It makes a lot of people uncomfortable. I've been on Zoom calls with parents in interviews, let them know how I work, let them know why I work how I work, and I can see the mum or dad getting triggered. And the parents openly said, "Yeah, I'm the person that doesn't do that. I'm practicing discipline with my child, and the child's 5 months. So what discipline does a 5-month-old need? But because of cultural preferences and how we've been raised and what we think we know, we struggle to shy away from it."
And so what does the child-led approach look like in practice? Like if you're a parent or a practitioner, how would you kind of describe that?
A child-led approach looks like you being triggered, very triggered, and you letting go of what you think is right, and having an approach where there's no rules. So I know for me, like, we eat wherever. So we might eat on the table, we might eat on the floor. But as long as the child's happy, we've got our whole lives to sit down in chairs and say dinner's here, dinner's there. And if the child's happier on the floor, like a child-led approach is, I have a child I look after, that I babysit. She sleeps okay when I'm in the house, but not all the time. So I go downstairs and we put on Blue Planet. And she falls asleep on my chest watching Blue Planet. So that's what it looks like. Also, you might walk into the household with me and your kids and we're on the floor laying down, because she sat on the floor, lied down with a cushion and teddy bear and just stared aimlessly into thin air. And I followed her lead. Because whatever this is making her comfortable. She seems happy. So I'm following. Or you might leave the house and they might point that way and we go that way. Then they might point right, we go right, and point left and go left, and that's it. And
adventure.
Yeah, and child-led is also me helping them navigate their emotions, where what is this child now showing me they need? Now they're having a little bit of anxiety, or they're a bit stressed, or they're a bit nervous, or they're a bit scared. What is it they need? What is it they need, or what do I need to do less of? And really, really sit down and work it out in this 10 seconds, because it's not that I don't like seeing children cry. It's more so I don't want to have children in spaces where they don't feel safe. Because an upset child is a scared child, it's a child that feels unsafe. Unless said child knows how to regulate their feelings and emotions. And 99% of children don't, because it's hard. I don't struggle with it. So,
yeah, and I think for a parent, that's a big job, isn't it? Teaching your child how to understand why they're feeling a certain way. And I know, like, that's something I'm like still very much learning how to do. And do you have any kind of tips for people, like based on your experience and what's worked for you, in terms of how you teach a child about their emotions?
It's start with yourself, because children are as good as the adults in their company. So, and respond to emotions, not behavior. So respond to how this person feels rather than how they're behaving, which is hard, because some behaviors might hurt us, but then why are you letting your child's behavior hurt you? You're meant to be the adult and not meant to take anything to heart, because children do what children do, and children tend to behave a certain way due to X, Y, and Z. It could be trauma, could be anxiety, it could be X amount of things why they're behaving. And only when you've taken yourself out are you not seeing yourself, are you going to be able to see it as that. If you're not going to be able to see it as that, it's because you're seeing yourself attacked. So a lot of it is doing the work on yourself, because these children don't need our help. They need a better version of us.
So you think, so it's also about them seeing you, how you're managing your own emotions, and
yes,
learning from that.
And the work you do in yourself, because children are gonna navigate how they are shown. So if you're in a space where you learn how to navigate your emotions in a healthy manner, your children will pick it up, because you'll then have the tools. So go out and get the tools and do some work on yourself, so you can then support your children to do the same. Because a lot of us are trying to have our children do stuff that we don't do for ourselves.
I'm just going to remind everyone here, by the way, if there are any questions you'd love to ask, then do feel free to put them in the chat, because I've got loads of questions and I can talk all day. But if there's anything, if you're sort of sitting there and you're thinking you've got a question as well, then do put it in there and we can answer your questions as well. But yeah, so one question I also wanted to ask you was, which books do you like reading with the children that you look after? Do you have any particular favourites?
I'm going to say it's usually what they choose, because I tend to have my favourites, but then it's not fair on the child me bringing in something that I like. So most children's favourites are Gruffalo, The Tiger Who Came to Tea, Mr. Men books as well, Roger Hardy's Mr. Men books, and just story books and just touchy-feely books and pop-up books. The Witch and the I can't remember anything now. One of my other favourites as well is Donaldson's Dairy.
Oh, yeah.
His name?
Harry McClary.
Harry McClary,
yeah.
That's one of my favourites, because that's one of my favourites. But I really try to really let children lead, even with stuff like story time. So let them have a book that they want to pick up, because I could read all the books I love, but the child isn't going to get anything out of. They can get a lot out of that, but it's not fair. I'm not really answering their needs and following suit with them if I'm just focusing on what I think I want, etc.
Yeah, that's very true. Like, yeah, and they sometimes just want the same book over and over again, don't they? Like, but yeah, that Harry McClary one, it's got a lovely rhythm to it, hasn't it? Yeah, I mean, you were talking a bit earlier about kind of the importance of diverse cultures and that sort of thing, but how do you think children benefit from being exposed to diverse cultures from a young age? What kind of impact do you think that has?
By not growing with ignorance. Because like I said, some of our children that might go to schools in areas where there's not diverse cultures, they might unintentionally grow up not realizing there's people out there that don't look like them. That not just on TV. So if they only watch TV and see Muslim people or black people or East Asian or Asian people, Jewish people on TV, they're only going to think that group of people fit that narrative. So they might only see Raheem Sterling. They might only see a Stormzy. So they're going to think every black male raps or plays football. Anything out of that is foreign to them, because they don't see black people in general. So it really helps to have representation on all levels for these children, so they can kind of see that women aren't just teachers. There's women out there that are firemen. I've got a friend that's a trucker, a HGV driver. She's one of the best at what she does, and like she drives those like 10-ton lorries to like all over Great Britain.
Wow.
And she's a mother, and more and more of us need to see that, so it's normalized, so our children are seeing it. Well, I spoke to her yesterday actually, and we're actually going to arrange me taking some children to see her at work and make like a day of it where the children will interview her, and to also see that women do other jobs.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
Children need to see it done so they can believe it can be done themselves. So rather than I say it, let's go and show them a shopkeeper that isn't a Turkish or Asian or Greek, because there's shopkeepers out there that don't fit that narrative. But if you live in certain areas, you would only think shopkeepers are Asian. So that it's very important that children see different cultures, so they don't kind of grow up naive to it, because us as adults are still naive to it, where I could walk down the road and a white woman could see me and cross the road, where a 10-year-old white child isn't going to do that, because they haven't got any ignorances or social social experiences that give that value. And even if they did, they wouldn't feed into it, because the generation they come from don't really fear and haven't got as much race issues that we have. The issues with race right now are adults' issues, not children's issues.
Very true, yeah. And so, and you told me about planning to bring kids to visit your friend who drove the trucks and everything. And is there anything else you've done with children you've looked after to sort of expose them to just sort of more diverse situations?
Yeah, it's not even expose them purposely, but it's like a lot of children live in London Fields, for example, London Fields area. And I've realised, like, a lot of children live in London Fields, a lot of children live Notting Hill, but a lot of children would never have gone to Portobello Road Market. Because of the way their parents shop and the kind of money their parents have, they never have to go over there. So the parents that live in London Fields never go to Dalston. So when they're with me, we're going to Dalston. We're going to the local market to get lunch, whether it could be the Caribbean shop, whether it be the hair shop, because I need to buy some hair grease, some stuff for my beard, and we go and buy food and veg in the market, or go to the Caribbean shop in Hackney, in Dalston, where Dalston is cultured. And I've got a picture of one of my children in Dalston by the picture. There's a big picture in Dalston of Hackney Carnival that's been there for years. And in the picture, he said, "Oh, there's someone that looks like me. There's someone that looks like him." And that's what I do that for those little moments, to expose these children to, not even expose, to have them lead normal lives. Because if you look at ourselves as adults, our lives aren't really led that normally, where some of us haven't got friends from other cultures, but don't realize we don't until we think about it. And it's not purposely, we're just conditioned. We live in areas where it's not cultured. You want to move to Kent because Kent's cheaper, but there's not a lot of culture in Kent.
People can just get stuck in that area, especially now, can't they? Like I live in my bit of South London, and I'm rarely getting that far away at the moment because of just how we live differently, don't we? Yeah. But it is important to do that. What do you think parents and early educators need to do in order to raise anti-racist children? What do you think is their role in making sure that children
work on themselves? Because your children will have quote unquote racist tendencies because of you, or because of what you're exposing them to, or because of what you're not exposing them to. So, like, children that become ignorant by accident, they become ignorant because of what they're exposed to. So it's really checking yourself as an adult and saying, what isn't it I'm not doing? And not forcing it. Don't go and get black friends, or don't go and get a transgender friend to prove a point, because that's not cool. But really question yourself. Have materials in the house, books from different cultures, different cultured foods, not the version of jerk chicken that Tesco's make. Go to a Caribbean shop and get actual real jerk chicken. The same way, go to an Indian restaurant and get Indian food. Don't get the Indian takeaway that we get in Tesco's for £10. Or
it's a much better experience, isn't it?
Yeah,
compared with the Tesco version.
even if you're trying to teach them, expose them to foods from English culture, try to find the most English English version of that you can find in the restaurant, so they can go in and get it from the source. It's not watered down. And then also other stuff like adults really, really question your mindsets and question your prejudices as well, where I know parents don't come across a male nanny a lot. Parents definitely don't come across a black male nanny. So there's only one that they all know. I think a second one as well that I know that they all know. It's either me or him. So also ask yourself, you might have reasons why you haven't booked me that don't due to my preference or what I look like. But if they are due to what I look like, question yourself. Why is that so? Why is it making you uncomfortable that this black male, you don't want this black male looking after your children? Why is that an issue with you? Or why is it you only want cleaners that are Turkish or Kurdish and not And why are you not getting a male cleaner? Why are you only getting a female cleaner? Because people tend to have cleaners, and most cleaners tend to be women. When there's men out there that can clean as good, and there's just different areas. So making sure you're questioning that, and like this, exposing your children to different TV shows. If they're teenagers, Fresh Prince, the old Fresh Prince was excellent. We've got
so good.
we've got Jojo and Gran Gran on CBBC, which is the only Afro-Caribbean cartoon on British television that's on weekly.
Really?
That says a lot,
and it's brilliant as well.
It's brilliant as well. So I think the work always starts with us adults. It doesn't. The children. It's what we need to do as adults to better the situations for them and normalize situations for them as well.
So it takes anti-racist adults to raise anti-racist children.
Yeah, definitely.
And I'm glad you just mentioned TV, because I was going to ask you next question, because my children watch TV. I think most like parents' children do, because there are always going to be those moments where everyone's tired, and it's going to keep everyone happy and pass the time. But I wanted to ask you, do you think TV can ever be beneficial for young kids?
Yes, because that Fresh Prince, our generation was raised like our generation wanted a dad like Phil, like Uncle Phil. So Uncle Phil was the dad we all wanted.
Yeah.
If you look at other shows what other programs did we get raised on? I can't really think too far, but the TV is beneficial to show these children a life that they might not even be attained to, where not every child has a butler. So letting them know, some people have butlers, some people don't. Some people have it because they're super busy. You can have one when you're older if you want. And then also as well, like I know a child that learned how to read from watching TV with subtitles.
That's really interesting. I've heard about the evidence on that. Like if kids are reading while they're listening, it can really help their reading.
And as well, it's like I'm an avid Marvel fan. So, and the Marvel multiverse is vast. It's it's big. So if your child is into Marvel or into Spider-Man, there's so much they can learn about life from Marvel. But Marvel doesn't hold prejudice against anyone. There's no gender issues in the multiverse. It's a good over evil thing. The good over evil is people that usually have a certain way of thinking, and there's so much that children can learn from this stuff as well. And other programs like real life programs, cooking shows, like me and my little girl I look after, she really loves Blue Planet. She loves seeing the icebergs crash, and David Attenborough's voice is the most soothing voice on British TV. So like if I got to experience that as a child, I want these children to experience that. Like I one thing I do with my teenage children, I show them a lot of old school films like Bill and Ted, Dinosaurs, Lion King, because a lot of children would never have seen Bill and Ted and realize how cool Bill and Ted was.
Yeah, and Lion King's a classic.
And Lion King's a classic. Toy Story, Jurassic Park. There's so many, and films like The Little Rascals, Problem Child, one of my top 10, where children aren't aware that Problem Child teaches you so much. Problem Child is about a child that was fostered, misunderstood, and his behavior was a cry for help. There's so much you can learn from that. The same as Annie. Every Annie that's been made there's a learning opportunity in that for said child. Especially the Annie where they've made it Annie a black girl. There's so much you can learn from Annie. So yeah, TV is helpful. Screen time is beneficial, and screen time can be healthy.
Yeah, I mean, I think Annie. Like, I remember watching that and just being like, "Oh wow," just like the story, like just being exposed to those emotions, those situations. Yeah, I completely agree. And we've actually had a question from Martha Hampson in the audience. So she said, "The care and love that Joss has for his kids comes across so strongly." She was wondering what are his favourite things about looking after children, and which things do you find the hardest?
One of my favourite things is just watching them navigate in a space that's new to them or old to them, and them letting me in. And because I don't work for any families full time, I'm there when they need me. it's really nice to see how they react when I'm gone to when I come back, because they kind of realize that I'm here once a week or every 2-3 weeks, and letting them, and sometimes they're a bit offish with me, which is fine. You can allowed to be offish because you haven't seen me in a while, but I let them navigate these emotions and I help them learn how to navigate that and how to deal with it, and let them know that emotion is fine. You're allowed to feel like that. And what I find the hardest is probably always making sure that I'm letting children lead, because it's an ongoing practice that I do. It's I'm always having to question myself to make sure that this child's doing what they want, not what I think they want to do, etc. That's one of the hardest things. I do it well and I do it right, but that's one thing that I question a lot. And also, there's not much anymore because I'm very steadfast in my practice, where I don't work with families that don't align with my ethos. I'm just not for you. And I now only tend to attract families that use my ethos or were interested in the way I work, and they have the same ethos in their household, etc. Yeah.
That's what I find hard too.
Yeah.
And as in, being child-led is hard every day, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there's a really interesting question here from Vanessa. So she says, like you said, the issue lies with the adults. What steps can we take to change the narrative with adults so they provide children with the right guidance?
Therapy. Therapy, is something that we all need. And and kind of questioning your own narrative, because your narrative is brought up from something that you were told was right, or what you've learned behaviors. So it could be from past childhood, could be from your relationship, could be just from life. And that version of it's okay for you, but is it okay for your children? So a lot of it is questioning that, research, reading, being kind to yourself as well. But and I say therapy, I would say Jane Evans is someone that's worth contacting, because her parenting through anxiety teaches you how to reparent yourself. Because as much as we love our parents, a lot of our parents didn't always do right by us, hence why we're now adults navigating life how we navigate life. And it sounds like an excuse, but when you really question why you have a certain mindset or you behave a certain way sometimes or in certain scenarios, it stems from something. So that needs to be unpacked, so you don't then spoil the environment for yourself and for your family, children, and honestly just be able to just reparent yourself in a healthier manner. Because we wasn't taught to be sensitive and be kind and be graceful to ourselves. We're now having to learn that as 35 plus adults, and some of us have mortgages, husbands, and children to navigate. So it's really learn how to be soft on yourself as well, which is something that therapy can't always teach. But they need to be patient and soft with yourself, and only when you're able to do that, you're able to plant that in the environment to then plant a new seed for your children to kind of benefit from and re-nurture them as well. And never be afraid to start again. Hopefully that answered your question, Vanessa. Thank you.
There are those moments, aren't there, where you think, I really didn't handle that very well with that child. And it's like, then you're like sort of thinking, how do I make this better? And also like, you also sort of need to let it go as well, don't you?
Yes, as well, which is hard. Which is hard because people get like, you can get upset. But what I have learned, it's something I've learned from therapy, that no hurt is intentional. But as adults, you would think your child's behavior is aimed at you. You would think your husband's behavior is aimed at you when his behavior is due to X, Y, and Z. And it's not making up excuses. It's just that when your emotions aren't regulated and you're not in a safe space and you haven't got the tools, or you're panicking, you tend to act how you act. And adults might get hurt as a child, adults might get hurt as an adult, but it takes a lot of work for you to be able to honestly say what I'm saying. Because, and it isn't saying you're not allowed to be upset, you're allowed to be upset, but also on the other side of it, understand that no one's honestly hurting you on purpose, unless they're intentionally trying to. But even then, it's a thing called fight or flight. And people tend to go into certain modes and only operate one way, and now they're in panic mode and they're attacking because the attack is then protecting themselves, and that causes more hurt than it does solace, because hurt people. So a hurt child might hurt the environment they're in. So what do we need to do for this child to help them not hurt the environment they're in? Look at the adults in the environment. What's not being done? What needs to be done? What needs to be taken out of the environment?
And so how you need to respond might be the opposite to how you would instinctively respond, and you have to and catch that.
and that's why I say respond to behaviour. Respond to the emotion, not the behaviour. I've actually did a blog recently for Isn't Council around that, and also not letting your cultural identity navigate how you might deal with your situations in life, be it friend, adult, or child, because culturally, most cultures don't like children speaking back to them. Like, our parents at a stage might have never had our grandkids speak back to them. Us as adults want our children to speak back to us and speak up. But even then, we might see it as they're being rude and being undisciplined because of our conditioning and what we're used to and how we see life. Where I kind of say there's no rules. There's really no rules with God knows what kind of parent I'm going to be, because there's not going to be too much structure in that rapport where I'm not letting my social expectations and my cultural expectations navigate how I parent with my children, because I can see I've seen the detriment it has. And we're now adults trying to do the work, answering questions like Vanessa's asks. Adults 27 plus having to reparent ourselves, which is beautiful, but it also can be avoidable from having conversations like this and knowing that we can hopefully raise a generation that doesn't need therapy. So hopefully, if not our older kids, our kids, hopefully don't have to ever go to a therapist for anything we caused.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice if we managed to achieve that in a few generations?
Yeah.
So who are the people in your industry who particularly inspire you and who you look up to, and why?
It would have to be Laura Henry, because she's become my fairy godmother. from just meeting her on Twitter when I was 19, and I DJ as well, so I was DJing and I was doing childcare, and I was 19, 20 on Twitter just tweeting, but some of the stuff I was tweeting wasn't always in line with the fact I work with kids and I'm trying to build up a certain brand. And she pulled me to the side one day and said, you should separate what you're doing and maybe not say that openly online because consequences. And she's one of the reasons why I'm probably here. And I've been able to navigate social media very well, if I'm honest, whilst DJing and whilst running my own business and being successful. Also Jamal Carley, because there's not many men in this industry that look like me. There's not. I can't think of actually no, there's a few black men in MFF, fatherhood and football.
Okay.
Yeah, but there's like a handful, it's 5 men in this industry that look like me. 4, 5, 6 black men that look like me, that sound like me, that dress like me. Liz Pemberton, who's a newfound friend, who's how can I put it, whose strength and confidence and fight for anti-racist practice and advocacy for the children's voice, because people weren't seeing that Liz's work of anti-racist practice is advocating for these children. She's not doing this for us, she's doing it for these kids. For these kids to be exposed to adults who are doing the work. So, and also Jane Evans, who's I don't see many practitioners of Jane Evans' practice. Jane Evans' practice gets frowned upon, letting children lead, attunement, answering children's emotions, learning your own emotions so you can navigate children's emotions, letting children's emotions lead and guide you. And anyone that really has that ethos, because not many practitioners do that I see online. They're getting there, but even I'm seeing people still tweet about reward systems and stickers and timeouts, and I'm like, no, why are we still doing that in 2022? But I know conditioning isn't easy. So those are the people that I really, really look up to in this industry. And there's not many others. Yeah, so, and I'm also David Kahn, Kate Moxley, And there's probably a name I forgot as well, Kerry. I'm in Kerry's book. I did a quote in her book because it's those individuals I just mentioned, and now Nesta, that are really trying to change the narrative and do the work that a lot of us are running from, because this work isn't easy. A lot of it is looking at yourself as Louise. A lot of it's looking at myself and saying, what do I need to do to help this, to change the narrative for our children that we're guiding? Because all of it is for the kids, it's not for us, because we're not going to benefit from this anytime soon. So yes.
Oh, that was an exciting list. Yeah, and then I sort of want to look into a lot of those people and learn more about them as well. So really interesting, and thanks for mentioning those.
Okay.
And I just wondered, because you've got a really interesting career, you're still doing the nannying, but you've also got this kind of work that you're doing, the sort of advocacy and the training and that side of things. And I can imagine there would be lots of people who are currently working in childcare and they're thinking, oh, I'd really like to be doing the sort of thing that Joss is doing. So I just kind of wondered, what kind of advice would you have for other people working in childcare who'd like to have a career like yours and take more of a sort of advocacy and consultancy role in early years?
One, just go for it. Because we tend to have all these ideas, start Instagram pages for any business, and don't post nothing, and tell ourselves, yeah, we're going to do it after this. No, just go for it. Just start. Also, work out what it is you want to advocate for, or teach or consult for, and do as much CPD training as possible, as much reflection as possible, and just go for it. And go to people, like, look for mentorship, because I've become a mentor for University of East London, actually, for their students. So go to someone like a Mia Jamal, or someone at Nesta, or someone in the industry that's doing what you think you want to do, and ask for guidance or mentorship, and work it out with them. Because they haven't got to be successful. They could just be doing a version of what you want to do in a different way. Don't go for mentorship with someone that's got a Rolls Royce off of the back of being a consultant. Go for someone that's become a consultant and there's something about what they do that you really adore. But ask them for strength and for guidance and for help.
Loads of great tips there, brilliant. And we've just had a question actually pop up from Claire, so I think this will be the last question we've got time for.
Yeah.
So she says, I asked my 8-year-old daughter how many male teachers and TAs there are in her school. She answered 4 and said she wants more. What can parents in society do to get a more balanced childcare and education system?
I've always had an idea and I want to do it. I just need some money, if I'm honest. A worldwide marketing campaign, like a year-long campaign, around the conversation of more men in childcare. A campaign that pushes more men into childcare, pushes more non-binaries into childcare, more cis or transgenders into childcare, where it's an ongoing campaign. We're seeing it on bus stops, where, because I often see Bright Horizons adverts all over bus stations, because they have the most money in the industry or Nursery world. So the same kind of power they have is what we're getting back from the government, DFE, to back it up, because I think it's for us to go. We can do it ourselves and change it and keep doing the work we do. But if we go to the powers that be and stick it to them and have them put their money where their mouth is and back it up and invest into different companies, invest into us lots of ideas, because the campaign could just be us going into colleges and to schools talking about being a male in this career and saying you can go and do this, you can go and do that, but making it like having like a 7-year plan. So that's how I think it might change.
Yeah, campaign. I love that idea, just opening people's minds to who can work in childcare.
Yeah.
That would be brilliant. Yeah, I think we're kind of drawing to the end of our session. So I just wanted to say an absolutely huge thank you, Joss, for such an interesting discussion and bringing so much of yourself to this. It's just been really great to talk to you, and I'm sure everyone else has really enjoyed it too. At our next event, we're going to be talking to Liz Pemberton, who you mentioned earlier. About the future of early years services, and that's going to be on Tuesday, 5th of April at 1 p.m. So please do sign up to that if you'd be interested to hear from her. But yes, thank you so much, Joss, and thank you everyone for joining us for a really enjoyable discussion, and hope to see you again soon.